Welcome to the Bend Like Bamboo Resilience Podcast, where we discover how life's greatest challenges can become our greatest strengths. I'm your host, Amanda Campbell, kinesiologist, MS specialist, resilience coach, and author. Get ready to be inspired by these remarkable humans who share their raw, real stories of transformation, the breakthrough moments, the lessons learned in the trenches, and the practical wisdom that turned their greatest challenges into their greatest strengths. These conversations offer hope, tools, and proof that resilience isn't just possible, it's your birthright. Together, let's discover how flexibility can become your superpower, turning life's storms into stepping stones towards the person you're meant to become. Let's dive straight into our next conversation. So I'm so excited to introduce today's guest, Karen Canham. Welcome to the Bend Like Bamboo podcast.
Thank you.
Karen is a nervous system and somatic coach, writer, and speaker who helps professionals and entrepreneurs move from survival mode into grounded, sustainable leadership, which is exactly what we talk about here on Bend Like Bamboo. And what I love about Karen's work is her signature nervous system framework that helps clients expand their emotional intelligence, regulate their stress responses, and lead with calm confidence rather than reactivity. Karen brings such a rich background to this work, Fortune 50 leadership experience, yoga therapy, and functional medicine health coaching. And she bridges neuroscience, somatic psychology, and personal storytelling in a way that makes complex healing concepts feel accessible and deeply practical. At the heart of Karen's teaching is this powerful truth that success isn't about doing more, it's about leading from a regulated, connected state. And if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that's music to my ears. So, Karen, welcome to the Bend Like Bamboo podcast. I'm really glad that you're here.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. And we were just chatting before. You're speaking with us today from Florida.
Yes, we both have warm weather right now.
Yes, we're very lucky. Very lucky. We're
Yes.
finally warming up here in Melbourne, Australia. I feel like we're finally defrosting. It's the 17th of December today, and our November was one of the coldest Novembers in a very long time.
Yeah, we've had some cold snaps here, but our cold snaps are like 60s. So I really can't ever complain.
Yeah, I bet. How long have you been living in Florida for?
We've been here for about 2.5 years now.
And you love it?
Yeah, we do love it. It's very different from LA. We're not in a city anymore. We're in more of like a suburban area, so that's pretty different. And
Mm.
we're used to like a Mediterranean climate. It does get really hot here in the summertime. But yeah, it's nice. It's very peaceful and restful. It's a vacation area. So
So why Florida? What inspired you to move there?
there was a couple things. My fiance has a company. He had wanted to move that company out of California for a while. Um, just cost of living in California was getting really crazy. It's kind of crazy everywhere, it seems like now in the United States and a lot of different places. So there was like somewhat of a quality of life there, tax reasons. Yeah, those probably were basic ones.
Yeah, yeah, that makes total
Yeah.
sense. Makes total sense. All right, let's dive in. I've got so much to ask you. This is really exciting to have you on the show. You've got so much experience in in this line of work. I'm really passionate about conversations around nervous system regulation and how to reduce stress, not only how this can impact our health, but also how we show up in the world and our ability to perform at our best. So you've had such a fascinating journey from Fortune 50 leadership roles to becoming a nervous system and somatic coach, and it's quite a transformation. Can you take us back to the moment when you realized that traditional success wasn't enough. What was happening in your life or in your body that made you understand that true leadership and resilience comes from within, from a regulated nervous system and not just pushing through?
Yeah, I think the time when it really hit me was probably, I think it probably hit me a few times through my life where it was like, what am I doing? Pausing. I'm not really, this isn't really me and what I'm doing right now. Um, but I didn't necessarily listen and continued to kind of like push through. A lot of that was chasing, this title and these corporations. Yeah, that was a big one. It wasn't necessarily the money to me. It was more of like a title that was a huge thing and that meant something. But to be honest with you, I'm not really a corporate person, and I knew that for quite a long time. I always taught, not always, but for a long time, I was teaching like yoga on the side, so I kind of had both, and it was worked for me for a while. Like I got to, in my corporate job, I got to utilize a lot of like what I did love about like coaching and leadership. But just like stuff that goes on in corporate red tape and things that just like you don't really have any control over. Just really was tough for me at times. It was really tough. I couldn't fully show up in the ways that I wanted to or lead in the ways that I wanted to. I've always been a person that wanted, if I saw injustice, I was going to stand up for that other person. And ultimately, what it comes down to is like, I really care about people and humanity in this world. And so it can come into conflict sometimes when it boils down to like, this is a business. And so I kind of by the time we moved to Florida, it was like, okay, I want to move into this full time. This is what I should be doing. This is what I love. I was honest about it in my corporate career, and a lot of people who were leading me were saying, well, that's okay that you don't love the industry necessarily, or you don't love like all the parts of it, but you love leadership and you love helping people, and that's enough. And it wasn't enough. I would They would sell me for a while on that, but it just really wasn't enough, and I couldn't fully express myself in the way that I wanted to. And so when we moved to Florida, I did go back and work as a consultant for a brief period of time for a startup that I had worked for previously, and it lasted for like a month, and I was just like, "What am I doing?" That was the time that I knew for sure that it was time for me to really focus on the coaching business and really utilizing the things that I saw make a huge difference in my life and with other people around me.
Yeah, yeah. So working in the corporate industry for quite some time, why do you think that is? That, it's the culture of just pushing through, push harder. I mean, I totally get as a type A personality myself, and most of my life still struggling with this, but much better at it now. I don't feel enough unless I'm achieving every day. And I used to want that acknowledgement, that success. And now in my 40s, I've really let go of a lot of that and different things matter. But for much of my 20s and 30s, it was that. Why do you think that that happens in the corporate culture?
It makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, we're kind of sold that way through that's what we're conditioned to believe.
Yeah.
Most of us, right? That's kind of like, I know in the United States for sure, that's what's put out there of like, this is how it works. You go to work for somebody, you work hard, give it your all, and then you'll get promoted and they'll treat you in the right way. That's been, in my opinion, been sold to us by the corporations because that's what makes them work. They need people that will come in there and do that and work hard and listen to what they have to say and not really, I don't want to say they don't have a voice. I mean, that's a far stretch. And I think a lot of things have changed and shifted since COVID. In the ways that corporations operate, there is more of a human aspect to these roles now. But yeah, it's not gonna work unless like, a huge corporation is not gonna work if you don't have these rules in place and like this is how it is and this is how it goes, right? And it really won't. Like those things have to be in place for that big wheel to be turning. Um, but that doesn't work for everyone. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just like for me, it wasn't me. And it was fighting against like who I was, right? So everybody's not going to be the same way, and that's going to some of that environment can work really well for a lot of people.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. I think it's also chapters of our lives, like, earlier on, maybe for many of us, it works because it's in alignment with what we're believing is true. And then as we evolve as human beings, we let go of what no longer serves us or attitudes and behaviors that are no longer of value, that are not in alignment with our growth. And that's what happened to me. And that's what, I watched all my clients go through is there's different cycles and chapters. And do you think that, having if more companies implemented the work that we offer, particularly in startups and companies, as they grow and get bigger, that it would help the team and the executives and the CEO and all the managers to be happier and healthier, but to perform better when they're regulating their nervous system.
I do. With the regulating your nervous system, I think is such a broad topic. And so the biggest thing for me within that regulation of nervous system is digging into these patterns that are shaping the way that we're behaving.
Mm,
Um, and so that to me, we use neuro tools which can help us in the moment to get into a more regulated state. We also use somatics, which helps us get into our body and really have awareness of what's happening in our body because our body will tell us first before our mind does. Um, but the deeper part of that is really getting into those patterns and if we are become more aware of what those patterns are, and it's not just the awareness, it's like, how do I shift those patterns and how are those patterns affecting other people? How are those patterns affecting how I show up in my company, how I show up in my role, how I communicate with my team? That is really the piece to me that I've discovered for myself and the work that I've done with corporations is really the biggest piece. And it's the piece that's the most difficult piece because it does take a lot of work to and capacity to be able to go in deep and really explore what those patterns are, and it's uncomfortable.
yeah.
Um, so yes, I mean it's transformative, and I hate to use that word because it feel like every coach says, "Oh, my work's transformative," but it really is the basis of what leadership is. And I think for a long time, this kind of goes off of your first question is like leadership to me used to be a title and that I got to tell other people what to do. And that I knew enough, right? I knew enough to be able to tell other people what to do. But ultimately, the more I progressed in my career, the more it was finding out that no, ultimately leadership is you being regulated. And again,
Mm,
that goes back to these patterns and like how are we showing up and how does that come off to other people and how do we communicate with other people? And the work never ends, right? There's always going to be stuff there to work on.
yeah.
It also doesn't have to feel like really heavy. I think a lot of people think that it needs to, and it doesn't have to be that way. Yeah.
I absolutely agree. I love how you just defined leadership then. That was beautiful. Yeah, that was beautiful. I also love how you make this critical distinction between coping and true regulation. Because for so many of my listeners, whether they're managing, chronic health conditions or leading teams while in burnout, resilience has become about toughing it out or just surviving another day. So can you explain what's exactly happening in our nervous system when we're just coping versus when we're genuinely regulated, and what does real resilience actually look like through that nervous system lens to you?
Yeah. I'll give you the car analogy here. It's kind of like when you're at a stoplight and you're on the brake, and then if you try to hit the gas and go while you're still on the brake, you're gonna damage your car. That's ultimately what's happening in our nervous system. And depending on the person, and there's a lot of variables there, depends on how hard we're gonna, how much damage we're gonna do, and when that damage is going to come. So, yeah, I mean, I grew up in the Midwest and I was thinking, like, yeah, just pull your bootstraps up, right? And there still is a lot of that thinking out there. I mean, I worked in sales and it was like, let's go, go harder, do more. Um, it's never enough. And what happens in the nervous system scientifically when you do that, like I said earlier, is your nervous system is responding to what's happening before your brain does.
Yeah.
Another thing here is what we've been taught for a long time is to focus on our mind and mindset work, which is helpful. But ignoring the body can create a lot of damage because damage has already been created before it gets to our mind.
Mm.
Then, in turn, if we go to our mind and we say, like, oh, well, I feel sad, for example, and I'm just gonna like not, I'm just gonna ignore that. I'm gonna ignore that feeling. I'm gonna ignore the sensations that are in my body because I need to show up today.
Yeah.
Um, then it just creates more of a cycle within that body, and then the body starts to hold on to that emotion or that specific event, and then it's like stuck in your body, and that's where we can get into these chronic illnesses like MS or other autoimmune diseases, for example.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know a lot about that. A lot
Yeah.
about having MS myself, diagnosed at 24, paralyzed by 29. And there's been a lot of yeah, a lot of my work working with clients who also have autoimmune conditions, it's very much about grief, getting tangled up in the nervous system and being stuck because it is suppressed because we've got to get up and get on with it, whether we're a mum or,
Mhm.
whether it's just about, yeah, just being able to show up at work. And we learn from our own mums and dads as to, how we manage our emotions and how we process them and whether we feel brave to be able to express how we really feel, which is really vulnerable, isn't it? To be able to, say, I'm sad. Often we choose anger as an emotion because it's a little bit easier than that deep emotional pain that is grief.
Yes, I can speak to that. I did that for a very long time.
Yeah.
It was easier for me to keep pushing through and moving forward if I was angry. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, I totally agree. And I imagine many people listening will, be experiencing that cycle where you've just suppressed how you really feel to a point where you even lose touch with how you really feel because, we've got the mind, got the body and the spirit. And when we disconnect, when we don't know how we feel, we don't know who we are anymore, and we really lose touch. And that's numbness, which is very MSy as well.
Yes. And that is where my journey started with the eating disorder. I didn't know I had to use, I said this before we started the recording, so I'll say it again. I had to use a feelings wheel. I went to, and this was in my I had an eating disorder from the age of 10, but it became pretty severe at age of 16. And I didn't go and get the correct treatment that I needed until I was like in my late 20s, early 30s. And at that point, I needed a wheel of feelings to figure out. And in the middle, it will start with the basic feelings of sad, anger, and then it like branches out to like get deeper into like even more depth of like what that sadness is. Is it depression? Is it loneliness? And I had to do that probably for almost a good year for me to even be able to access like what my main emotion, what my core emotion was, and then to kind of like build down from that of like what was really there. And
Yeah.
then, after you're able to access those emotions, then you can start to feel into the body. That was my experience anyways, and that's my experience
Yeah.
with most of my clients is like you can't just it's like meditation. People will be like, "Oh, well, I suck at meditation." Well, yeah, you can't just like hop right into it, right? There's a process that you need to go through to
Yeah.
be able to like build and access and titrate and start building that capacity in your system.
Absolutely. That's the whole concept of bending like bamboo is that process of returning back to self, just like a tree is anchored and, down into the earth and ground. And when we return to our center, we regulate. And then it's only from this place can we have, if you imagine a tree that can now bend in direct proportion to the wind, you can then have a
Mhm.
flexible mindset and therefore reimagine the stories that you've been telling yourself that lead to all this destruction. And some emotions that we just haven't let go of.
Yeah, I really love that visual. Um, I said for this was more recent, you're always a work in progress, that I really wanted to feel like I was in my flow. Um, that I didn't feel that way anymore. I wanted to feel like I was flowing through life. And so I love that image of the tree. And yeah, when we're not flowing, then, there's stuckness and things break off and become damaged. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
really beautiful.
Yeah. I have a resilience formula and it's anchor minus letting go plus flexibility equals resilience. And that anchor is returning to self and regulating your nervous system. But, we have to sort of become aware of why we're split off and any stuck emotions there. And I use kinesiology for that. And then once we can return to self, not only can we regulate our nervous system and reduce stress levels, but we can open our hearts again. And then letting go of redundant ideas and thoughts and beliefs and stories that we've accumulated across our whole lifetime that then leads to that flexible mindset.
Yeah.
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 So you have this beautiful phrase that the body leads before the mind follows. And as someone who's recovered from paralysis, I know this truth very intimately. And my body had to heal before my mind could fully believe that it was possible, but vice versa as well. I had to believe it before more healing would come. But for people listening right now who feel completely stuck in survival mode, maybe their nervous system is constantly hypervigilant or they're always firefighting at work. What are the signs their body is showing them that they need to slow down? And why is slowing down actually a strategy for more clarity, creativity, and power, not weakness?
Yeah, before I answer that question, I like to talk about this slowing down thing because a lot of people will be like, well, that's great, but I don't have time to slow down. I'm a mother, I work full time, I have a husband, I have responsibilities that I have to take care of, and that's real life. And so it's not, I guess with that wording, it's not necessarily that we have to do less. It's that we need to take the time to, and this is a slowdown of like pausing, and it can be for a very brief period of time. So again, this is going to be different depending on where different, it's a very big spectrum of where everybody lands and like how they go through the process of regulating their nervous system. Um, but this slowing down piece is just taking the time to start to check in with the body of what am I feeling? Is there tightness in my chest? Is my breath shallow? Is it deep? Am I breathing in my chest? Am I breathing in my belly? Do I have tightness in my shoulders? Is there tightness in my hips? All going through the sensations. Am I even recognizing what's in my room right now? Am I noticing like how um, unbright my lights feel right now, So it's just that little bit you can take 5 seconds to even feel like your desk and the tactile of different things like around you. And those little things that feels really silly and stupid, but that is really what starts to create the safety in your body. That tells your body like, oh, I'm present, I'm safe here in this present moment. And that's the first step to start to build that capacity in your nervous system to start to be able to once you do those little things, then that little step, those little steps that you take, it will
Mm.
become automatic of that you're more aware of what's happening in the body and all of those sensations and in your environment.
Yeah.
Um, and then, then you're able to have more capacity and then you're able to start to go deeper into those patterns.
All part of the healing because we don't want to be aware of what's around us and our bodies when we're recovering from trauma and stress.
Yes,
So this is all like, so by bringing this into your awareness, and it doesn't have to be complicated, it can just be, journaling, meditation, walking, movement, all these pillars of health that we take for granted that can really, it's really just bringing all of what you just said into your awareness as a daily practice every day. It is, and then it's an exercise program where when the storm really does come, you can then bend and you've got the tools because you've been doing it every day.
correct. Right.
Mm,
I love that.
mm,
Right.
mm.
And if you weren't, then you wouldn't bend, you would snap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what does it mean when you work with your clients to give them more clarity, creativity, and power? What does that mean to you?
Um, it means the regulation piece. So this goes back to the leadership. It's really self-leadership. To be able to be a good leader, you need to be able to lead yourself. I meet with a lot of clients, and including my own journey, is I didn't know, and this happens a lot from childhood trauma of just needs not being met, right? That then as an adult, you don't know how to meet your needs. And so part of this work is learning how to reparent yourself or meet those needs.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, the nervous system regulation, and I like to say this too, is that the goal is not to be regulated all the time because it is normal for us to be in these other places. It's normal for us to be in a heightened state. It's normal for us to be more in this like malaise kind of shut down state. It's when it becomes chronic is when it becomes the issue.
yeah.
Um, and so being able to um, recognize those pieces
Mm,
and self-lead
mm.
um, so that you don't get into these chronic places is really what regulation is. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of forgetting what your question is on the regulation piece.
Yeah, I looked at your work, so much of your work, and you use those words a lot that, that why act slowing down is actually a strategy for more clarity, creativity, and power.
Clarity, creativity, and power. Yeah. Um, I have learned and what I have seen many of like colleagues go through and then clients that I have worked with is that this regulation piece that we're in it is truly this self-leadership piece, which is allowing us to operate from our authentic self, which allows us to be in compassion, connection, creativity,
Mm,
um, power, empowerment.
mm.
And and again, it's not about being perfect. We're human, right? And we're not going to always operate in that way. Um, but it's a clue. Like when we feel disconnected, that's a clue for us to then pay attention to that. Well, why am I feeling disconnected, and where do I feel that in my body?
Yeah, yeah. And
To
I
be able
also,
to help bring us kind of back.
yeah. And then when we're stressed, we're not only, dysregulated, but the heart shuts down and it closes over in protection. When we can be powerful and authentic, it's when we're leading from our hearts being open, and that's vulnerable. And that can be difficult. But I believe that, you know, when I'm working with all of my clients, my mission is helping them to regulate that then leads to them being able to live their lives from an open-hearted space where they can give and receive more love. Everything, you know, is life is so much better. We do have more clarity, creativity, and power from an open heart space. So much, life just gets so much better. It's like sunshine. And that's why I love your work. And also, you're writing a book called Wired for Resilience. And
Yeah.
have this signature nervous system framework that helps people move from survival mode into more grounded, sustainable leadership. Can you walk us through what that framework looks like in practice?
hmm Yeah, so the framework is basically three things, well, four things that I utilize, and one being the neuroeducation piece. And I used to not, um, I would educate people, but it wasn't as big as a piece of what I do now because I found that this top-down learning is really crucial for your system to regulate and feel safety and connect to the body up work that we do. Um, and so then I do body up work, which is things that are the somatic experiencing. So that would be, we're paying attention to our body, and then that information is moving up to our mind. That's what I mean by the bottom up work.
Yes.
Um, and neural tools is something that I use as well. So a neural tool would be something that would, if you felt, a little off, like you could feel anxious or maybe you feel like your energy's low, you could use a neural tool in that moment to kind of bring you more into the center. Um, and then I use parts work therapy, and that's the part of the work that is looking at these old patterns, when they developed, why did they develop, why are they still here, what's their purpose of serving me now. Um, and then with the parts work therapy, you start to understand what other people's parts are and be able to map other people, as we call it, other people's systems, and understand other people better, attuned to them. And that really helps with the communication piece as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, beautiful. I love that. I love that. Um, it's such important work. I really, really love what you're doing to help people. Are you more passionate about the one-on-one coaching or the group leadership work with businesses and, workshops?
I really love the one-on-one coaching because I really get to know that person really well. A lot of people that will move through my group programs will move into the one-on-one coaching. They're so different. But I would say that, yeah, the one-on-one coaching is pretty, I get to have a deeper relationship with the client, and that I like.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too. Me too.
Yeah.
There's nothing like the one-on-one relationship. I've got clients that I've seen monthly for a decade. And then, it's no matter whether it's 8 weeks or 10 years, it's just an honor to share that journey with someone. Mm.
Yeah, it really is. It really is an honor, and to be in that space with someone with all that vulnerability and be able to sit there with them and hold that space for them. It's like this, it's kind of the same as being a yoga teacher. It's very different than taking a yoga class yourself than teaching a yoga class. And so there
Mm.
is this transference of, you're always learning from your clients too, and growing with
Yes.
the client as well.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. So, Karen, I want to end with something really powerful that you teach. You talk about, how slowing down isn't weakness. It's actually a nervous system strategy for, the clarity, the creativity, the power. This is so counterintuitive in our always on culture. So, can you explain why slowing down is strategic, not self-indulgent? And then I'm fascinated by this ripple effect that you also describe, how when one person regulates their nervous system, it can literally change a room, a team, or a family system. So, for my listeners who are leaders, parents, or healers, can you paint a picture of what this looks like? How does calm become contagious? And what's one practice someone could start today to begin creating that ripple effect in their own life?
Yeah, that's a really great question. One simple thing that you can do is take 5 seconds. Let's make it 10 seconds.
Mm.
Um, every hour, and you don't have to like, it doesn't have to be a ritual and time it and write it down and set a timer and all of that. Just kind of have that in your mind of like, okay, 10 seconds every hour. I'm going to take a pause and I'm going to either like feel my desk. I'm going to orient around me, which would be like naming what you see in your room, naming the colors. It can be one specific object that you hone in on and really getting curious about that one specific object. It can be, focusing in on your breath or just doing like a feel through of your body from head to toe. I know that
Yeah.
was a lot of options that I gave you, but that's a starting point of just taking 10 seconds every hour just to like check in with yourself.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I do that with my clients too. I set them up with morning and evening journaling and meditation to touch base, to set up your state and to remember what we're working on. And then I give them a wristband that says, I'm enough, the black one there. And yeah, just a prop that helps you to go, oh, yeah, I'm working on this. Oh, I'm receiving more joy and love today. I'm letting go of grief or whatever it is that we're working on. It's great. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people I work with and coming from high achieving, I don't want, I, I don't want them to feel like there's more to do. And so even
yeah,
though this work is work, um,
yeah.
it's not about doing more.
Mm.
It really is about just listening in. And I know that's not like the greatest wording either. Like, what does that mean? A lot of people I think will say, well, what does that mean of like listening in? It is just the practices that I described. And those are just really small things that you can do. I mean, you can do it when, it's like, oh, I'm going to get up and go to the bathroom, and you can use those skills as you walk and like feel your feet on the ground and notice what's around you. It doesn't have to be like another added thing to your plate.
No. But how is this ripple effect?
The ripple effect is what my experience was, and then what my clients' experiences are, is that they'll immediately tell me within a couple weeks or 3 weeks, usually at 2 to 3 week period is when they'll say like, oh, like my husband is, commenting on, like my husband was really skeptical of me signing up for this. That's usually what it is in the beginning. And then it's like, oh, he's like noticing changes in me. And then, a couple months in, it's like this drastic change. It's progressive, the work that I'm describing of like taking these seconds every hour, being using those practices as loading them onto another thing that you're doing. That's the beginning to do those things. And that brings that brings safety to our system. And so you're going to start to be more operating in that ventral vagal state is what we call it, which is that state of like that calmness and clarity and power. Um, that's what your system needs. Your system it's screaming to you like, "Hey, I'm here. I'm communicating to you. Are you listening to me?" So just taking even a little bit of that time and being like, "Yeah, I am tuning into you. I feel you. I see you." And then, the deeper we can go into that work of getting into like, what exactly am I feeling? Where do I feel this in my body? And then the more we do that work, then that becomes second nature of like when you feel sadness, you can feel it automatically and you feel exactly where you feel it, right? It's usually in the same
Mm,
spot of your body most of the time.
mm,
Um, so you start to build that capacity on your system.
yeah.
Once you have that capacity, again, you're able to operate from this green zone, as I call it, more often instead of being in this like heightened state of where we're anxious, we're pushing through, we're reactive, or we're shutting down and we're walking away from situations, or we're just not communicating. So that really is and when we show up with other people like that, other people, it's called co-regulation. So we start to regulate other people's systems based on the regulation of our system. So I'm sure everyone can think of a story of like if you're a mother and you react to your child when they're having like a tantrum, that usually doesn't help. It usually makes things worse. Or like a dog, even for example, it's like when we're reactive to that dog is going to respond in a way that is not from like a regulated place.
Yeah.
So the more that we can respond from a regulated place, the person back to us is going to respond from that regulated place, and then that regulation just grows.
Yeah, it just helps all round our how we interact in all of our relationships, personally and professionally, and then we're able to be better human beings ourselves. Karen, I love the work that you do. I really appreciate your time today and for chatting to me on the podcast. Yeah, it's been wonderful.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I learned a lot.
Yeah, beautiful. So I will have all of your links in the show notes, karenandwellness.com, if you want to check Karen's work out. And remember, guys, to bend like bamboo is to believe in the power of flexibility and to let go of all those stories that we tend to tell ourselves and to be more anchored and connected. And Karen, have a beautiful rest of your day. And everybody, I'll see you again soon.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you for joining us on the Bend Like Bamboo Resilience podcast. I hope today's conversation inspired you. And if this resonated with you, please rate, follow, and share it with someone who needs to hear this episode. If you would like to go deeper with me, whether you're leading through burnout, navigating health challenges, or rebuilding after setbacks, I'd be honored to support you. Head to bendlikebamboo.com to explore our programs, check out my new book, or book a free discovery chat. Trust your ability to bend and flow with life. I'll catch you at the next episode.